The real shock isn't that Prince Harry wants a way back. The real shock is that while headlines keep whispering about reconciliation, royal insiders, public reactions, and even empty royal properties seem to be sending the exact opposite message. Behind every hopeful rumor about a return stands a wall of resistance that appears stronger than ever. And if the signs hidden throughout this story are connected, then what we're witnessing may not be the beginning of a royal comeback at all. It may be the slow collapse of a dream Harry never truly stopped chasing.
And Meghan Markle from the British royal family are being erased, and this is far more significant than just the destruction of their former home.
No matter how much they try to portray themselves as pseudo-royals, and I think you can see quite clearly on the part of the Duke of Sussex an attempt to try to open up an avenue to return to the fold.
Charles has made it very clear that he wants Harry back. You know, we saw it in Harry's book. Don't make my life a misery, but don't make my final years a misery, boys.
No matter how carefully the narrative is packaged, no matter how many stories emerge suggesting Prince Harry still has one foot inside the royal world, there is a growing sense that something isn't adding up. Publicly, the image is often one of longing, a prince separated from his roots, a son hoping bridges can eventually be rebuilt. But beneath that emotional storyline lies something far colder, something that many royal observers believe reveals the truth far more clearly than any official statement ever could. And strangely enough, one of the biggest clues may be a cottage, not a palace, not a throne, not a royal title, a cottage, a property that sits quietly in the background like a forgotten chapter nobody wants to reopen. Year after year, it remains empty. Year after year, nobody seems interested. Even figures within the royal family who have faced their own controversies reportedly showed no desire to move into it. That detail alone has sparked endless speculation. Why does a royal residence remain untouched? Why does it feel as though the building itself has become a symbol of something nobody wishes to revisit? Sometimes silence speaks louder than any public announcement. Sometimes what people avoid tells a bigger story than what they embrace. The unanswered questions linger, and the longer they linger, the louder they become.
Seems as it's been revealed through The Sun that assessments are being made of the property to see if it can be split yet again into either multiple residences, and basically to erase every single trace of Harry and Meghan on the property. And that is a really fascinating revelation.
A huge blow up, a big fight around Harry's plans for summer return to the UK, including spending time at Balmoral, potentially, and reconnecting with the...
Those questions pull us deeper into territory many headlines avoid, because this isn't really about real estate. It's about reputation. It's about memory. It's about whether certain wounds inside the royal family have healed at all. The public is often presented with images of nostalgia, stories about misty British mornings, reflections about old homes and familiar places, sentimental reminders of what once was. Yet behind those carefully crafted images sits a much harsher reality. The gap between the fantasy and the facts appears wider than ever. On the surface, everything looks calm, but look closer. The cracks are everywhere. A bigger issue seems to be emerging. Money, influence, relevance, the foundations that once looked unshakable suddenly appear far less secure than many expected. The post-royal empire that was supposed to redefine Harry and Meghan's future has faced constant scrutiny. Every new launch is analyzed, every business move is dissected, every announcement becomes another test. And lately, those tests have become increasingly uncomfortable.
And of course, there was a lot of criticism about what Harry and Meghan, let's say, did. You know, they had to add a yoga room, a 5,000-pound copper tub, and all these sorts of things because Soho House, of course, was involved. I still am absolutely flummoxed by Meghan Markle's obsession with Soho House. I feel like I need to stay there one time and maybe, just maybe, I will understand, but I doubt it. It's just a place to lay your head. I guess, and hang out. And then obviously Harry and Meghan left.
Behind glossy branding campaigns and polished photographs lies a question that refuses to disappear. Is the business vision actually working? Critics point to products, launches, and marketing efforts that have generated more headlines than momentum. What was once supposed to symbolize independence now faces growing skepticism. Every new rollout seems to trigger another wave of commentary. Every ambitious project is followed by another debate over results. And that's where things become fascinating, because the public conversation has shifted. The focus is no longer on what was left behind. It's increasingly about what has been built since leaving. Some observers see innovation, others see desperation. And that difference in perception is becoming impossible to ignore. What makes the situation even more dramatic is the contrast. This is a couple who once stood at the center of one of the most watched royal events in modern history. Global attention followed their every move. Cameras captured every smile. Millions watched every appearance. Fast forward a few years and suddenly discussions revolve around product bundles, marketing strategies, and whether consumers are actually buying into the brand. That is a dramatic shift. And shifts like that create pressure. Pressure creates tension. And tension creates mistakes. The deeper you look, the more the story starts feeling less like a triumphant independence narrative and more like an ongoing battle to maintain momentum. Then came another twist.
Initially, the house was actually subdivided into multiple sections because it was actually a residence for multiple staff members. So there was a process undertaken to redo the property, make it go from a multiple family residence to a single family residence. And of course, this was to the tune of millions of pounds. Some of those structural changes, these sorts of things, I'm sure were needed to upkeep a property. There's so much you could talk about with Frogmore. Obviously, it was the home that Queen Elizabeth II gave to Harry and Meghan for their wedding. Now, gave is a very, let's say, in some ways misleading. It was sort of lent to them officially, unofficially. So how it works in the British monarchy is that there's a series of properties that belong to what is known as the Crown Estate. And the monarch, whoever that happens to be, can give some of those residences to members of the royal family, royal staffers, as a, let's say, a thank you for their long period of service and these sorts of things. And of course, Frogmore Cottage fell under that.
Products became symbols. Small items became major talking points. Ordinary objects suddenly carried extraordinary expectations. Every launch was treated as a make or break moment. But that's what happens when expectations become larger than reality. The pressure grows unbearable. Every decision becomes magnified. Every outcome becomes political. Every success feels temporary. Every setback feels catastrophic. And while branding battles unfolded publicly, another battle was quietly growing behind the scenes. A battle that may ultimately matter far more than candles, products, headlines, or public relations. The battle over Harry's future in Britain. The battle over whether a return remains possible. The battle over whether the doors are actually opening or quietly closing forever.
Meghan Markle thinks that signature candles based on herself, her marriage, and her children are going to sell to the broader public. And she thinks now if the matches are offered individually, she thinks, let's say, offering those matches individually is going to get people to buy some as well, though I'm sure she's going to stock much fewer of those and much, much more in this signature scent collection to get this collection to move. And this is just such a bare bones basic idea. She is treating this matches, something you can get for cents, like 50 cents, 25 cents. She's offering matches as like sort of a huge look at me style item. Now, if I refresh this page,
the phrase freedom flight once carried excitement. It symbolized escape, reinvention, a fresh start. But time changes the meaning of words. What happens when freedom becomes complicated? What happens when distance grows heavier than expected? What happens when the life you left behind refuses to disappear from your thoughts? Those questions now hang over every development, because no matter how far Harry travels, Britain remains at the center of the conversation. The monarchy remains at the center of the story. The family remains at the center of the mystery. And that's where things start becoming truly explosive. Because the next battle isn't about branding. It's not about products. It's not even about popularity. It's about access. It's about security. And it's about whether Harry can ever fully reestablish a meaningful presence inside the country he once called home.
Sort of view on why people are so fascinated in the sort of fall of the House of Sussex is it doesn't reflect particularly well on the human heart, but there's a great concept in Greek tragedy and Greek drama called the chastisement of hubris, the chastisement of arrogance, the chastisement of, and I think that's why people remain fascinated by this story. Why on one hand they're like, oh, I hate her, I never want to see the sight of her again, I can't bear it. But the other side, we can't help reading about the latest disaster to befall them with the sight, and it's because of what they did to the royal family is because the way they left, saying that they were going to redefine service, that this was going to be a whole new world.
And that is where the entire story suddenly explodes into something much larger than a dispute over security arrangements. Because according to growing speculation, this battle has never been simply about bodyguards, police protection, or taxpayer funding. Those are merely the visible pieces. The real prize may be access to Britain, access to royal life, access to the possibility of rebuilding a place within the institution that once defined Harry's entire identity. Critics were ruthless. They argued that choices have consequences and that stepping away from royal duties meant accepting a completely different reality. Yet from Harry's perspective, losing that security arrangement potentially means losing something far more important than convenience. It means watching one of the last practical pathways back into British life become increasingly difficult to navigate. The reaction was fierce because everyone understood what was really at stake.
King Charles has been facing a lot of accusations lately that he is behind some type of attempt to secretly return Harry and Meghan to the UK. It's been discussed as something called Operation Thaw, which has seen a whole load of political figures from Yvette Cooper to Boris Johnson sort of be sent out to try and make the British public believe that we in some way should give Harry another chance. But I think this is some real pushback, and it's making it clear, is it not, Ray?
Here they spent £2.4 million, originally of taxpayer money, which they later then paid for themselves, in order to put in these yoga studios, to put in all these copper baths and so forth. So much for living within your means. And now, of course, all comes to naught. It's quite a nice luxury to be able to spend 2.4 million without even thinking about it. But yes, I think the messaging here is quite clear. There is no place for them within the royal household, within the royal entourage, no matter how much they try to portray.
That is why resistance appears so strong. To some royal observers, restoring that foothold would represent the first step towards something bigger. And while Harry reportedly continued searching for ways to reconnect, another storm was allegedly developing much closer to home. Reports began circulating about summer plans, family reunions, and hopes that his children could spend meaningful time with their grandfather during a period when concerns about King Charles's health remained prominent. On paper, it sounded like a touching family moment, a chance for healing, a chance for bridges to be rebuilt, a chance for old wounds to finally begin closing. But then came claims that changed everything. Rumors spread that Prince William and Catherine had absolutely no interest in reopening those doors. Whether entirely accurate or not, the mere existence of those reports was enough to send shockwaves through the narrative of reconciliation. Suddenly, Harry appeared trapped between two worlds that were moving in opposite directions. On one side stood Britain, family history, childhood memories, and unfinished relationships that continued pulling at him from across the ocean. On the other stood the life he built in California, the family he created, and a future that seemed increasingly disconnected from royal expectations. The tension was impossible to ignore. Every rumor, every report, every alleged disagreement seemed to point toward the same painful reality. The further time moved forward, the harder it became to merge those two worlds together. Meanwhile, public commentators began noticing something else. Power inside the monarchy appeared to be shifting. Conversations that once centered on Buckingham Palace increasingly focused on Kensington Palace. More and more people started asking whether William was becoming the defining force shaping the monarchy's future. And if that perception is correct, then Harry faces an obstacle far greater than public opinion. Because unlike King Charles, who was often portrayed as a father hoping for healing, William is repeatedly described as someone who has not forgotten the past, not forgotten the interviews, not forgotten the memoir, not forgotten the years of public conflict that placed family tensions under a global spotlight. That distinction changes everything. Reconciliation with a father is one challenge. Reconciliation with a future king is something entirely different. As the months pass, another pattern keeps emerging. Efforts to maintain relevance, efforts to project influence, efforts to create a successful post-royal identity. Yet those efforts frequently collide with awkward headlines, controversial associations, disappointing turnouts, and uncomfortable questions. Each setback fuels a growing perception that the support system once surrounded surrounding Harry and Meghan no longer exists. The advisors, planners, strategists, and experienced palace operators who once anticipated problems before they appeared are gone. Without that machinery, even small mistakes become major stories. And that brings us to the mystery at the heart of this entire saga. Despite the public estrangement, despite the lawsuits, despite the interviews, despite the accusations and the years of tension, rumors continue surfacing that Harry still hopes for some form of return. Not necessarily a complete restoration, not necessarily a full royal comeback, but something, some connection, some pathway, some acknowledgement that the door has not been permanently locked. Yet standing directly in front of that possibility appears to be one immovable reality: William. And that is why the story remains unfinished. Because while some believe reconciliation is quietly taking shape behind closed doors, others insist the future king has already made up his mind. One side sees hope, the other sees a wall. One side sees a family conflict waiting to heal, the other sees damage that can never truly be repaired. So the question remains hanging over everything. Will Harry eventually accept that California is now his permanent future, or will the pull of Britain continue growing stronger with every passing year? Because if recent events have revealed anything, it is that the battle is no longer about titles, headlines, or public appearances. It is about identity, about belonging, about whether a prince who walked away can ever truly find his way back. And somewhere behind palace walls, behind carefully crafted statements and strategic silences, that answer may already exist. The only mystery is when the world will finally discover it.